Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 0000043 of LivLive in the wake of an incredible Raleigh, North Carolina Hurricanes Stanley Cup victory. Let's go Canes. What an incredible run. And we had to have something hockey related on the show. Months ago, I had my nephew, Charlie Raith, on the show, and he played for the USHL, and then he played 4 years at Notre Dame playing hockey. So it was a really fun conversation about what that sport or high-level organized sports has done for him in entering the real world and all that stuff. So really excited today to have Matt Cross, who is a hockey coach, hockey trainer, Toronto born and raised, now lives in Raleigh, also a nonprofit executive, cancer survivor. So much stuff to unpack in today's show. Thank you for being here, Coach.
Appreciate it. I'm excited.
Yeah, you want to just dig in? I just glazed over your background, but you want to kind of give us a little bit more of a detailed background there?
Well, yeah, a little background on the last 10 minutes so all the viewers can have a little chuckle. But Dave sent me a message yesterday asking to be a special guest here today. And I didn't see the text until about 20 minutes ago while I was walking the dog. So, you know, as I explained to him, sometimes you got to say yes, which I did. And as I'm rummaging through my apartment, figuring out what do I wear? Like, well, what hat do I wear? You know, I'm a hat guy. Most people that know me, they see me without a hat. It's usually shocking. But I'm like, you know, this might actually fit because I'm a man of many hats, right? So I've decided to start with the RTCF hat, which is the charity hat, and then I'll move to the Raptors hat halfway through. So yeah, a little bit of a background. I am originally from Toronto. I'm a Canadian. I grew up in the city. You know, I grew up in the suburbs, but went to high school kind of down in the city. And, you know, was raised as a city boy, was on public transit, you know, at 10, 11 years old. Obviously grew up in a hockey town. I have a brother and a sister. We played every sport you could imagine. And, you know, Toronto was what shaped me. Toronto was kind of where my soul was born. And being a really multicultural city, I was exposed to a lot of different people and types of people. And I'm, you know, really thankful for kind of my upbringing in a city like that. And I always thought I would be a city boy forever. And in 2011, I came down to Raleigh on spring break. I had 6 months left in community college, and I think my mom was dying to get me out of her house. And Primetime Hockey, which is a hockey school, had relocated to Raleigh. And so I came down here and spent some time playing golf and, you know, saw the new setup. And a few months later was asked if I could get a work visa, would I want to pack my bags and move to North Carolina. And that's kind of how it all began. Thinking that I would be a city boy forever, I quickly loved what Raleigh had to offer, a little bit of a smaller pace of living and just beautiful scenery, the weather, you're close to the mountains, close to the beach. And it was a really, really good fit for me at the time. And so I've, you know, over the last 15 years, I've been a hockey trainer at Primetime Hockey. We do a lot of individual sessions, small group sessions, seasonal camps. It's individual skill development. And then we also have the Raleigh Raptors organization, which is a travel hockey organization with 13 teams. And I've been coaching the 2012s for the last 4 or 5 years. So I've been really lucky. I, you know, there's obviously sacrifices with every job, but man, to be able to, you know, be a kid and kind of do something I love and be active and work with young people, I'm really blessed to be able to have a job that I really, really enjoy. And quickly in 2019, I got diagnosed with testicular cancer, which was kind of out of the blue. Had a bump on my testicle, typical male, you know, didn't really think it was that dangerous, didn't really like going to the doctor. And of course, turns out that's the most common cancer for 15 to 35-year-old boys or males. Went through chemotherapy, multiple surgeries, have been cancer-free for, I think, 6 years now. And the most important thing that ever happened to me, I mean, I always say, looking back on it, you know, I wouldn't necessarily choose it, but I wouldn't, I would want to go through the same thing that I went through, because it just taught me so much, and it's been a springboard and birthed so many amazing things in my life, including a charity. So when I got into survivorship, I really wanted to kind of give back to Raleigh, and realized there was kind of a hole in the men's cancer space. And so we started an organization called the Raleigh Testicular Cancer Foundation, which supports men that are faced with testicular cancer. And we're really proud of that. So yeah, I'm a man of many hats. Yeah, how about the Canes winning the Stanley Cup? I mean, who would have thought 15 years ago, a kid coming down here for spring break, you know, being the only hockey school in town at the time, it was really special to kind of see the growth of the sport. And it was really neat to kind of take a breath and look around and realize how many new fans, how many new kids, you know, are going to kind of want to be hockey players and want to dream and be inspired and get their name etched on the Stanley Cup. So it's been a wild 5 or 6 years, a wild 6 months, but man, a lot of good stuff's been happening. So yeah,
I imagine you've seen a lot of changes in the youth hockey space, you know, since you got here. And you and Stan have been, you know, such a huge part of that. Something that you talk, and, you know, full disclosure, you know, you coach my 2 boys and then train all 3 of my kids, right? But I've learned so much. And my team at work, like the hockey metaphors that I bring into so many, it's kind of laughable at this point. They're like, here he goes, right? But there are just so many incredible parallels, you know, between, you know, hockey or any high level sport, but hockey just has so many of them, right? Because it's so hard to score. There's so many errors. There's so many mistakes. Like the level of perfection is impossible, right? And so I've learned so much. And I think, you know, what you've taught the kids is really valuable. Do you just want to kind of speak to, you know, the parallels? You know, we don't need to get into business and management necessarily, but so much of, yes, it's skills, it's speed, it's power skating, it's all this stuff. But, you know, the raising good human beings, the life lessons, like I'm sure there's a million of them, but do you just want to talk to that a little bit?
It's my favorite. I mean, we could do an entire podcast on just this topic. I was raised in a sports household for whatever reason. I'm not sure exactly why, but, you know, right now, the World Cup, when the Four Nations was on, the Stanley Cup, Liverpool Football Club, my family has group chats, and we are active in the group chats. We are all watching, you know, and, you know, you think of all the hours sitting around just watching sports, right? And I've met lots of people that think sitting around watching sports is a big old waste of time, right? Like, what are you doing sitting around wasting time on the couch? You know, and for me, you know me, my personality, I'm a complicated dude. Nothing to me is simple. I see so many layers in everything. You know, hockey, professional sport, it's just a vehicle into the window of life. And the best things that we can learn, that we can experience. Yeah, I think, why do you keep going back and being drawn into watching professional sports? It's in that moment, watching somebody's dream come true. It's watching somebody's self-doubt for years and years kind of be killed, and them realizing that, you know, they are who they thought they were, who they wanted to be. I mean, think about the Masters with Rory McIlroy. You know, that was watching a guy mentally struggle for 10 years and just watching him succeed. Sports is just a vehicle to teach us about life. Travel sports, you know, with hockey where I work, it's a vehicle for coaches to teach kids about the lessons and to give them the tools so that they can be better human beings, right? It's supposed to be human first, athlete second, you know, and there's just so many things in there. You know, I think if you do things the right way, if you make the human part the most important part, I think the rest of the athletic part and the success part and the winning part takes care of itself. I'm big on like, okay, where do you want to be? And then kind of back your way into that. I think, everybody's trying their best in travel. Travel sports gets a bad rap, and I think for good reason in a lot of different areas. The worst thing that I hear is, well, why are you doing this, spending all this time and money when Johnny ain't going to make the NHL? And I've never heard anybody talk about this on any podcast or any of the content that I consume online. For me, it's very simple. The pursuit of excellence needs to be taught. And it doesn't matter if it's your 9-year-old daughter, Debbie, or whether it's your teenage boys, or whether it's adults, right? Like the pursuit of excellence is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do that every day. It's always you versus you. Every day I get up, I'm like, man, I got to be a little bit better than yesterday. And sometimes it's great and sometimes we fail, but teaching kids that being the best you can possibly be, even if it's just youth hockey, that's a really, really important message. And it doesn't matter if you're going to go to the NHL or not, right? I was having this conversation with a player of mine who have coached the last few years, and he's actually moving on to a prep school up north. And we were driving to his dad's workplace, which is a professional workspace in the NASCAR world. And I was telling him about this concept. And I said to him, it doesn't matter if you're the janitor, if you're the person at the front desk, if you're part of marketing or sales, whether you're part of the actual team that performs the sport every day. The pursuit of excellence, you want to be the best you can possibly be. Even if you're the janitor, be the best possible janitor you can be. Be the best possible server you can be. And that will do you good. And sure enough, we walk in that morning at 7 a.m. We had a 5 o'clock wake up call. And the first person we see is the janitor. And the janitor's probably already been there an hour. And we walk in, and the 10 people I'm with all know his name. And it's clear that he was being the best janitor he could possibly be. And so, I think sport is it's a perfect avenue to teach us about life. And I'm sure you lean on it a lot in business, and I'm sure your team appreciates it. But I don't think there's anything better.
Yeah, it especially, as youth, it ingrains a culture of continuous improvement. And one thing that I always loved about the sport of hockey, which I didn't grow up playing at all, I played basketball, and basketball is really, as a young child, is really, really hard to get that level of coordination and to understand these rules and all that stuff. But hockey as a young child, first of all, the base of it is ice skating, which people pay to do for fun, right?
Yeah.
So every other sport is running is the base of it. Nobody really pays to go run. Well, some people do, but it's just kind of what you do. So, fundamentally you have skating as the base of it. And it's so amazing to see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old skate for the first time and then skate for the second time and the improvement, and then skate for the third time and the fourth time. And the improvement that you see so quickly just by practicing and doing it triggers something in the brain to be like, wait, every time I do this, the next time I'm better, and kind of the reps mentality. But then the third piece, which I think is really, really valuable, across all sports that are team sports, which is kind of the teamwork mentality. So if you can just talk about, I have no idea how you're able to, and I think we have 15 employees, right? And all these different personalities. So I'm trying to learn, because you're managing 17 personalities of teenagers and all this. So what have you learned about, building teamwork and in the world of sports and in the world, I guess, right?
Yeah. Let me touch on the other point you made first, and then we'll segue into teamwork. It is interesting about hockey how you got to be able to skate, right? And skating is the hardest part, and it actually takes the longest to improve. And you're right. There's definitely times where they do a session and you can see improvement. I talk to the athletes about this all the time because, kids will come out and they'll do a really hard 60 minutes, right? And I think sometimes you leave the ice and it's like, all right, it's hard for them to quantify, like, did I get better or did I not get better, right? Like sometimes it's very difficult, especially with skating. I mean, skating can take a long time to see like dramatic improvement. There's nothing better as a coach, and I'm sure as a parent, where you watch Debbie do some lessons, and then the fourth or fifth session in, she's better, right? And it's just like, that is the freaking best, right? And then when you recognize that they recognize that they're getting better, I think that is ultimately the best human experience available, right? But I try to tell the kids, the idea is that at the end of the day, at the end of the session, you can get in the car, you can go home, put your head down on the pillow at night, and kind of give yourself a pat on the back, knowing that you put in the work, right? And knowing that you put in the work, that momentum also really builds, and then you can become unstoppable. I think as adults, we all know that the days that we really do well, the days we kill it, we get up, we do everything on our checklist, we treat people the right way. You get to the end of that day and you go, damn, I did good today, and that's the best feeling. And then the worst feeling are the days where you did a shitty job, and not only did you do a shitty job, but it was your fault. Those are the worst, when you put your head down on the pillow and go, damn, that was on me today, right? And so I try to tell the kids, like, training isn't always about quantifying how good you're getting. It's the pursuit of it, committing to the pursuit of it, and knowing that you're doing everything that you can to improve every time you're out there. So yeah, I think that's important. Listen, teamwork, man, I don't know this because I can't judge the seat to which I've never sat, but I would put money on it that figuring out how to create a team from 11-year-olds to 17-year-olds, I would argue, is probably 10 times harder than doing it at a professional level. Again, I don't have any scientific data to back that up, but it's challenging. It's challenging. I'll give a few thoughts. I mean, I think I always tell the story. I think every coach at the beginning of the year has an idea of like culture, right? You have an idea of, okay, this is the culture to which I want to create. So how do you create that culture? You go in and you create guardrails and rules. And then you hope that at the end of the day, the kids uphold that culture. And the reality is the kids never uphold the culture because they're kids. They're not professionals. I've learned that the hard way multiple times, right? And so I've learned that kids want to know that there's an adult in the room that has a vision, that has a dream, that is confident in their abilities, and is going to keep them accountable in those guardrails. I've tried it multiple ways, but I think when the coach is very clear on how things should be done and they hold the kids to that, I think the kids buy into that more. I think that's more real. It's hard. I mean, in professional sports, I mean, I heard Rod, I think for the first time ever in a public interview, say, and it was during the playoff run, like it was in the last few weeks, he said, they specifically had to get rid of a few guys that weren't fits. And he said that out loud. You very rarely hear a coach say that, because he knows what he's doing. He's calling out 4 or 5 guys that have been through this program that, moved on. Professional sports, you can get rid of a few bad apples. In youth sports, it's tough. I mean, I've let kids go, before the season starts or into the season when they're not fit. But, 1 or 2 kids can really change the makeup of a culture. Think about, I mean, we obviously you have a daughter, but I work mostly with boys. Last year was first year Bantam, and I've coached Bantam many times, but it had been a few years. And I realized about halfway through the year that 80% of what we needed to work on, where we needed to get better, and where it was directly related to our success or failure was the mental side of being a teenager. Had nothing to do with our skill set. The skills stuff part was easy. Running a practice, teaching them the skills, teaching them the system, simple. navigating the teenage boy mind and all of the things that they're battling through is hard. And I don't think as youth organizations, I don't think as travel sports organizations, I don't think as coaches, we do enough work in that space. I have spent 90% of my time this summer preparing for next year on how we're going to develop the mental side of being a young man. Think about a teenage boy, right? He has 1 foot into manhood, but 1 foot still in childhood. He's probably about to go through puberty or is halfway through puberty, and some of them, of course, have finished it. They're figuring out identity. They're trying to really figure out who they are and who they want to be. They're dealing with peer pressure. So they want to be accepted into the tribe. They want to be liked. They want to have friends. And so they're going to act out so that they get attention, so that they're accepted, right? Laughing at the wrong time, during a coach's speech, or doing something inappropriate gets a reaction. That reaction gets grabbed as being accepted. It's a challenging time for boys, and it's very, very difficult. And so all of that kind of has a hand in culture and team, and whether your team is cohesive, right? I do think if a coach can kind of have a vision and a storyline, and they can feed it to the kids, and they can consistently kind of spoon feed that message, I do think that, a really good bonded team can be creative, but it's challenging. It's very challenging you hope that you pick kids for your team that have maturity and leadership qualities, and that their parents are supporting of that, and that can kind of be the driver and the engine of all of it. So that's why it's always important. You're not just picking kids, you're picking parents, you're picking maturity levels. You're not just picking hockey players.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty parallel to the world. I mean, obviously, yes, 7th and 8th and 9th grade, 7th and 8th grade probably weren't my best self. I think I'm a pretty good person, but I wasn't the best Dave. Yeah, it totally. just wasn't. But still at the at the highest level, even in business, or Brendan Ward, same thing, right? These guys are paid millions and millions of dollars, but still, the teamwork still just doesn't always work. And they might be the most skilled player in the world, and they're all trying to make it all come together. But, my understanding, it aligns with the world of business too, is vision and buy-in. And that question to the vision and buy-in is, at a certain level, and I don't know about in youth sports, but how do you allow your team to help build the vision, right? Versus saying this is the vision for who we are. Because it's easier to have someone to buy into something that is a part of creating it, right?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm not going to say that I don't give the kids a voice, but you'd be shocked at when you attempt to give the kids the voice, how there's no voice there, right? You want to, the kids obviously have to think that it's an achievable dream. They have to like the dream. Figuring out whether your story is something that they really want, that's challenging. When we just had our first kind of team gathering, I've explained to the parents this year that I'm going slow, right? Our goal for this group is to win a state championship and win a national championship. And knowing all the things that we just talked about with teenage boys, we're not going to win the state championship in the summer. We're not going to win it at training camp. We're not going to win it in December. And me being a guy that's enthusiastic and passionate and wants to get going, you can cause burnout. They're kids, and we want to peak in March, in April. And so, when we had a little pizza party, I got the kids together and I kind of explained to them, this was my thought, that I wanted spring and summer to really be spring and summer, that we weren't going to do a lot. We weren't going to talk about stuff. We weren't going to set these goals. We were going to go a little slower. And it's challenging. I mean, me, I'm a guy that loves to talk, right? And they always say, you got 2 ears and one mouth. so I know, one of my weaknesses is sometimes you just got to listen a bit more, but you do got to look around, you got to look around. You got to see the body language of the kids. You have to listen to them carefully. And that takes a lot of work, right? I think I always joke that coaches all have a plan at the beginning of the year. And then when they realize that the plan takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, they start cutting corners, right? In order to achieve what you and I are talking about, you got to know your players really well on a really personal level. And the only way you do that is if you have lots of conversations about stuff that's not hockey related. You got to know them. You got to know them as kids. And so that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. One thing I wanted to touch on is, and maybe you can speak to this about your business. And again, I'm not a business owner. I work for Stan, but I'm in a managerial position, right? And I have been for a long time. So again, I always say I'm careful to judge the seat to which I've never sat. But I am a big believer in conscious capitalism, right? I believe that there are layers to a business, to a hockey team, to an organization, and that there should be equal value in all of the different layers to that organization, right? I think, the players are important, but the parents are also really important. The organization as its own little ecosystem and community is important. The community of the factory and Wake Forest is important. The city of Raleigh is important. The employees at the business are important. The suppliers, right? The relationships you have with the rink. Capitalism, right? Like businesses, I think, get a bad rap because too many times we've seen that it's all about the money, all about the money, all about the money, right? And I think youth hockey organizations also get that reputation, where I think where we're missing the mark as an industry is there should be more important to some of those other levels. And I think the byproduct of that what's birthed from that is a better team, a better culture, a better community, and you make a shit ton of money, right? Right. Again, I don't know how you run your business, but like if your employees love working for you and love working for your job, and are invested in the bigger mission, then I think you become a better business. You create better products, and then you make more money. Like I always say that my mission as a hockey coach is to use hockey as a vehicle to develop young men into future leaders in our community. That's my mission. And if that's my mission, right, then I can just back everything into that. It has nothing to do with hockey. It has nothing to do with teaching Parker Dave how to take a one-footed snapshot, right? If the human being is my mission, I think that the rest kind of takes care of itself. And so, I would ask you maybe like, what is your deeper mission as a business owner, right? Some people might think it's simple, but do you have like a deeper personal mission that your company is trying to achieve? And do you think your employees and your suppliers and everybody kind of understand that mission?
Yeah, I mean, I think we work pretty hard at kind of defining that, mission vision statement, which is improving people's lives through curated design. So, if you look through our body of work, it kind of makes sense, right? Like we're bringing good design to the world for the purposes of improving lives. And if we execute that really well, then yes, we make money, right?
Yep.
As kind of the byproduct of what we're trying to bring to the world. And I love the way you talk about all the different layers, because that's 100% right. And I think we've learned that. We've been in business for 14 years now. It's about you, you and your clients, and that's it. But in the world, we do, design and construction in people's houses. So you start to realize the client is more than just a house and someone that lives in it. It's a family. They have a history there. They have a life there. There's all these crazy things that happen, and we want to understand how they want to live, right? Not what isn't necessarily. Good hat switch.
Yeah, we're at 11:31. I'm assuming that's halfway. I mean, this might be the longest podcast ever because I think you and I might talk for another 2 hours. But we'll do a little switch here. We'll give the Raptors some time. Sorry.
I know Meg's like, aren't you going to put on all your Raptor stuff? I'm like, no, I'm trying to stay indifferent.
Yeah, I'll make it Raptors. Sorry, Dad.
Perfect. But yeah, and then when it comes to, as you realize it's about more than just it's the family and all that, and then you go a little bit farther and you realize, like, wait, there's all these people involved in the project. We have all these trade partners, so we need to give them some attention and bring them into what we're trying to appreciate, we're trying to bring to the world, which is, for us, is everything from sharing finished photos with them, right? Like, this is what you help build, to having a trade appreciation party. And then that other layer is 100% community. And last episode, I had Nick Raffini on, who is in the world of hospitality and music and marketing, and brings it all together. And really the underlying thing is community. Like, that is such a huge part of all that. So, we make efforts to be involved in local festivals and fund the Riverside Arts Center, Little League. If anybody has a Little League and needs a sponsor, we will always sponsor Little League, right? Like, it helps them, and then we get Livco on the back of that jersey. So I love the way that you talk about those layers, because you don't realize those on day one, and they're all right in front of you. There's so much to it. And then, even doing this show is just like another layer of being part of a community of, I don't know, interesting people and business owners and all that stuff, right? Or just people trying to, learn about all the lessons learned as we go on this crazy ride, right? Something like that.
Yeah. Back to the question of being a team too. Like, I'm a bit of a lone wolf. I'm a bit of a loner, right? I have a dog, I let people into parts of my life via social media. I like to kind of have a little bit of a hand on my brand. And I say that because I have a very tight knit group of close friends. I'm not the type of guy that has 30 friends. I am blessed that I have these amazing relationships with families like yours. And I consider you a good friend. But I have a very small amount of real friends. You can learn, right? And this is a Jordan Peterson thing, so I'm stealing it, but you can tell who your really, really good friends are by sharing good news with them. When I read that 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, let's put this to practice, or let's pay attention a little closer. You always think that when you get sick or you're in trouble or when you need help, who helps, right? And I think that's easy. I mean, helping people, in my opinion, is easy, especially when somebody clearly needs it or is asking for it. But when something really great happens in your life and you share that good news, watch at who celebrates it, and watch at who celebrates it like it's their own success. That's been really interesting for me over the last 5 or 6 years, because I've had a lot of failures, but I've had a lot of wins too. And I think having teammates and having coaches that want the best for each other is the secret sauce. Even in youth hockey. And again, I'm going to sound like it's negative, but it's not, because it's kids. They're learning. They have so many things that are really difficult for them. But even when kids score goals, you can very easily watch your bench and see who celebrates and who doesn't, or who celebrates in a fake way because they're a little bit jealous, or, it's not them scoring or getting the attention. And so I think whether it's business team, business community, a hockey team, a soccer team, getting all of the guys to want to be successful for other teammates is probably the secret sauce. And, there's a couple kind of pieces of content that I know I've consumed over the years. They literally make me cry. They make me cry every time I watch it. One, at the end of the Miracle on Ice movie, when Herb Brooks is underneath the bleachers by himself, and he kind of has that moment where he realizes that the responsibility that he had for his players, for the country. It was just like such a coach's moment where the best coaches want it for all of these other people. You know, there's a Pinball Clemens who was a football player in the CFL. He became head coach of the Toronto Argonauts, first black coach to win a Grey Cup. And he has a really great speech. He's a great public speaker. He was speaking to a business group. And he was, he really great storyteller. And he was going through the story of winning a Grey Cup. And he kind of weaves his way through the story. And then at the end of the story, he kind of explains how, when he won it as a player, it felt very selfish. He won the Grey Cup, right? He was going to get this ring. But winning it as a coach, he won it with 26 people. He won it for 26 people. And he could feel the weight of that celebration for all 26 people. Rod Brindamore, right? Like, you could tell that it meant 10 times more to him as a coach than it did as a player, because he wanted it for Jordan Stahl. He wanted it for Aho. He wanted it for the team. He wanted it for his assistant coach, Tim Gleason. I'm going to give Tim a shout out, right? Tim, the Canes, arguably the best coached team based on how their players performed that we've seen in 20 years. Tim Gleason, man, that decor, right? The way that they were coached.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And so Rod wanted it for Tim. He wanted it for the city of Raleigh. He wanted it for those guys that won it in 2006, that wanted this, see the city celebrated again. You could just tell
the ushers, right?
The ushers, everybody, the people that give me those pork nachos every time I go to the game, right? And how do you get to that? That I think I learned that early as a hockey coach, because I was realizing I was working with young people and I was impacting young people. And again, it's hard to like grab on at the end of a session, like, did I really help that kid today? You leave a lot as a coach with the faith that your impact just rippled, that, Dave and Park did leave, kind of changed a little bit. And the way that they interact with their parents and with their siblings and with their teammates and students is a little bit because of what Coach Matt did. And that it just ripples and ripples and ripples and ripples. And then I got sick, right? When I got cancer, the story goes is a bunch of women that were cancer survivors really wanted to do a whole bunch of different things, kind of help me and my family set up how we were going to get through cancer. And one of the ideas was to do a Facebook page. And, I was really hesitant at the beginning because it felt very selfish. My ego was getting stroked. It felt very good getting all this attention. And I agreed to it reluctantly. And it started as just kind of a singular post to update hundreds of people, so I didn't have to text and call everybody back. And that gave me a platform to share my story. So I started to blog and I started to write and I started to kind of process what I was going through. And then the reaction from the community was, everybody sharing with me what they're going through. So I was getting messages from men that had just been through a divorce. I got messages from people that had a loved one that was going through cancer, somebody going through a bankruptcy, somebody going through issues with their children. And you realize that everybody's the same, everybody's battling something, but my impact was greater than I ever could have imagined it would be. And that these blogs weren't just blogs, right? That it was rippling and rippling and rippling. And so, now I know through the charity, working with men that have cancer and sitting with them during treatment, or, putting in a weekly or daily phone call, or connecting them with other guys that have been through cancer, that impact like goes way beyond your imagination. And it just goes back to like, I think that's the greatest human experience available. I always challenge people, like, if you can make other people your focus, it doesn't make your problems go away. It doesn't, take away the things that are really scary in your life, but it shifts the focus. And it's the best ever. It's the best feeling in the world. Like if I win the lottery, it's going to be the best ever, because I'm going to take that money and I'm going to spread it across all of these different places.
Can you build an ice rink if you do that?
Yeah, well, sure. It depends on the level of winnings, right? I mean, ice rinks can be pretty expensive, but yeah, I mean, it just goes back to making other people more of your focus. And I think to build a team, if you can have players that celebrate other people's wins, if you can have employees that celebrate other employees' wins, if you can have the owner celebrate your employees' wins, I think that's what creates an unbreakable culture.
There was a dad a couple years ago, and this is when the kids were a little bit younger, but his son was struggling scoring. He was a big scorer, and he wasn't scoring a goal. And his dad said to him, or told me he said to him, well, would you rather score a goal and lose the game, or not score a goal and win the game? And he's like, not score a goal and win the game. And he's like, so who cares? Right?
Yep.
You like shift your brain there a little bit. Like, what are we doing? This isn't about me. It's a team sport. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, you'd be shocked in a locker room where after a big win, there's 5 kids in there that are upset.
Yeah,
they played bad, or they didn't get on they didn't get a point. And again, they're kids. That the professionals are the ones that get it because they've had practice, they work at it, and it's probably the reason why they made it as professionals.
But they want to, or they didn't feel like they brought their best, right? So if the company succeeds and someone feels like they didn't perform well, they may, same thing, feel like that. But that just means, hey, we're getting there. Not everyone's perfect, especially 100% of the time. So
I think, and again, not if you want to move on, we can move on. But I think a lot of this goes back to a lot of us being emotionally illiterate. Myself included. I'm 42, but I'm still learning, man. I am still learning. I think being curious and wanting to learn is the way to go. And I've always been like that, and I still am every day. But I think most of our parents were emotionally illiterate, and I think that probably they passed it down to us. And then if we don't do a better job, we're probably going to pass it down to our kids and our students and players. I think we all need to do a better job building tools on how to navigate a lot of our emotions. And again, I see this a lot with the boys. I see this a lot with hockey players. It's understanding that emotions are real. We all have them. And that situations and environments are going to cause emotions, but that those emotions usually narrate a story, right? And that story is usually deeply rooted in insecurity, right? So when that kid's in the locker room and he hasn't scored a goal and he's upset, even though the team won, right? That emotion that he was feeling was probably embarrassment or frustration, or, he's annoyed. And the story that he's telling himself is, if I didn't score, then I'm not a good hockey player, or because I didn't score, dad's going to be upset, or I didn't score, so, I might not make the team next year. And the truth is that's not the story, right? That he has to find a different truth, because the different truth is that coach probably didn't really care. Dad's not angry, right? And so I think, again, a lot of, whether it's business, whether it's hockey teams, whether it's community, we're all too controlled by emotions. And I think the next step to travel sports, and I think business, is kind of is learning how to provide better tools for everybody to navigate our emotions.
I like that. The story we tell ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, when I was at game 2 of Canes versus Habs, Dobish, right? Who I think we all saw was like a big personality. He was fun to watch. He was obviously in a window where he was doing really well. If you remember, it was when he had butt-ended kind of one of the Canes guys in the head as he was going around the net and got a penalty for it. And the crowd is right there, and the crowd's giving it to him. And he's gesturing with the crowd because, you can tell he's a young guy. He's got a big personality. He ain't afraid to kind of show that personality. And as this is happening, the people that I was sitting with, I said, now watch this. Watch him reset his emotions and watch him go through the process of grabbing a different truth and grabbing a different story. And you literally watch him. He went to his net, took off his mask, and he took his water bottle and he sprayed it on his face. And then he wiped one side, wiped the other side, put his mask back on, adjusted the mask a few times, hit his posts, like goalies do. They're a little crazy. And then he skated off 5 feet from the goal and he went down in a butterfly. And he was like, going through this reset routine where he was visualizing making saves. And that was like in real time. Yeah. Watching somebody realize at a professional level that his emotions had taken him somewhere and that he had to tap into those tools to reset that story because he's the goalie and that his teammates and his team and his organization needed him. And that's why the pros are pros, right?
Yeah.
Anytime they pan to the bench during a game, playoff game, like third period, 8 minutes to go, like biggest moment ever. And those guys are just stoic.
But I think it's important to note there too, like that is not natural.
No.
That is something learned and practiced.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's not, you don't just have a great goalie mind. You're a great goalie because you're an incredible athlete and you practice and do all this stuff. And then the goalie mind training is a whole nother level. Or a McElroy, right? Like look at Rory. Like anyone who's gonna be front and center where the margin of error is everything, right?
Yeah, it's learned. It's practiced. It's worked on over time. And do certain personalities or maturity levels or upbringings help certain athletes get there quicker or get to a further place? Probably, right? I mean, I was talking to my dad the other day. We were I'm not going to be a Mitch Marner hater, but we were talking about Mitch Marner, right? And I think I say this too, like it's fun to talk about hockey teams, right? Like, and we all pretend like we kind of know. We don't know shit, man. We don't know what goes on in the locker room. We don't know what goes on in team meetings. Like we know 0.00% of what goes on behind the scenes. So I could be totally wrong, but Mitch clearly has some mental kind of obstacles that he's been working through for years. And my dad was talking about how, like your chemical makeup, your genetics combined with your environment before the age of 25 really puts you down a certain road. And that road is really hard to get off after 25. And again, I don't know this, so I don't want to be a Mitch Marner hater. And I don't know how big your podcast is, so I don't want to be sued. But Mitch
it's huge.
Saw a lot of it's huge. Okay.
Mitch is probably watching right now.
He's probably, yeah, you're right. He's probably watching. Growing up, he saw a lot of success early, and his dad was just freaking crazy. I mean, you've seen the videos. I believe he went to a private school. And so I think, his mind has kind of been taught to go one direction. And I think you heard him in the end of the season interview talk about how over the last 5 years, he's really started to take care of his mental health. And I think it's obvious that he's working on it, which I really love for him. But yeah, it's learned, it's practiced. It's you need the reps, you need mental performance coaches. Because again, I just don't think that's.
Is Vegas really?
I don't think that side of business or athletics. I know at a professional level, I'm sure they have mental performance coaches, but why are we not developing these kids from 9 to 25-year-old, a little bit better than we are? I think it would really help, especially if the mission is human first, athlete second. Right.
Absolutely. Awesome, man. Well, we're running a little long as usual. I just have a couple. I have two more questions for you, and then we'll wrap here. Especially since it's a short notice and you got stuff to do. Looking back at the playoffs, and not to put you on the spot, but did you have a favorite game in there that you could watch over and over and over again?
Well, just so the viewers know, I mean, I have been a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, obviously, my whole life. You know, I grew up in Toronto and watching hockey, you know, at 3, 4, 5 years old, watching Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday. And so, you know, watching the Leafs kind of through 92, 93 with Doug Gilmour and Wendell Clark and Felix Potvin, you know, that's how kind of the love of hockey beyond the sport, you know, kind of like a religion, kind of like, you know, identity. You know, and the Leafs had a little bit of a run in the early 2000s, but for the most part have been a complete failure of an organization, you know, many, many, many times over. And so I've kind of hit the road with the Toronto Maple Leafs, you know, and I kind of declared a number of months ago that I was kind of done, that as a fan, I kind of had enough. And, you know, my dad, I think, understood it. A few of my close friends were really angry with me. Like, how could you possibly do that? Like, you know, look at you living in Raleigh 15 years and now you're an American. You won't cheer for the Leafs. And I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, obviously, but too many things had been done with that organization and that team that I just could no longer support. And at some point it's like, you know, how do you protest? Well, you protest by not watching, by not buying merchandise, by, you know, not buying the TV package to watch.
Yeah. I don't think you're alone in the Toronto boycott of the Maple Leafs because they want something to change because nothing has to change.
Well, yeah. I mean, the MLSE is in the business of making money. They're not in the business of winning a Stanley Cup, right? And that in itself, they've been a success, right? Like if their mission is making money, right, for the pension fund, then it's worked. You know, they say their mission is winning a Stanley Cup, but I'm not convinced that that's actually truly their mission. So, you know, as long as people still buy tickets and buy merchandise and go, I mean, why would they change, right? And so I kind of had enough, and you know, I needed a team to pick. You know, being the Raleigh Raptors, you know, obviously the Junior Canes are our rivals, and so kind of picking the Canes is a little bit frowned upon as a Raptor. But you know,
the Junior Canes and the Carolina Hurricanes are two different teams.
They're two different teams. They're two different organizations. There's an argument that the NHL team doesn't even really support the Junior Canes. And so there is that. And listen, when I've been going to Carolina games for 15 years. I find the games to be highly entertaining. It's a great building. It's got great food. When I'm there, I'm cheering for the Canes because it's fun to feel part of a community. And obviously Raleigh is my home and it's very important to me. I've been to a few playoff series over the years, you know, going back to Washington, I think 2 years in a row. And that was like the most fun I've ever had. And so this year I was kind of loosely cheering for the Canes. I was kind of into the Habs, again, kind of frowned upon as a Leafs fan. And then I just had to make a decision, right? And when the Canes had paired up against the Habs, I said, I got to cheer for the Canes. I was really wanting to see the city of Raleigh celebrate a Stanley Cup. I wanted to see the city that I had called home for 15 years. You know, I recently just got a green card, so like permanent residency for me was a big deal. And having the hockey team locally kind of win a championship, I thought was just, that would be so special.
Yeah.
And obviously being in the hockey industry, seeing, you know, young kids, future athletes, an entire generation of young fans, or maybe an older fan, you know, 60 or 70 and hasn't really watched hockey and now is into the sport. I wanted that. I wanted that more than any kind of rival that I had with the Canes overall. Mm-hmm. And it was a hard team to not cheer for, right? They're a blue collar team. They play, you know, the right way. They have a team of depth of all sorts of heroes. You know, it's not just a superstar. It's like, you know, 8 or 9 guys were key figures. And so, yeah, for me, going to game 2 against the Habs, that was special. That was the Ehlers goal in overtime. It happened right in front of us. You know, going to game 4 watch party. I went with Coach Blue, who a lot of the kids work with, is a local young strength coach. We went to Lenovo Center, and I joked, like, that's the most fun I've ever had at a sporting event. And we were just watching it on a TV.
Right. It was unbelievable.
It was crazy. And it was a young crowd, like college, aged kids, all the people that had kind of been priced out of the regular games. And so they were there to party. They were there to rip off their shirts and chest bump, and you're hugging people and kissing babies, people you don't even know. And that was just so much fun. And then when the crowd kind of goes out, outside of Lenovo Center, you realize that it's a community, right? You realize that kind of that rippling effect that we've talked about is right there in front of you. So that was really special. And I mean, listen, the moment for me, I think I explained it before we got live here, but my plan was I'd watch Game 6 at home. I had thought that they were going to wrap it up in Game 6. I thought that they would get it done. And so halfway through the game, I got in the car and drove down and found a parking spot, a good 25-minute walk from the actual arena, and walked in and got there before the third period and witnessed the third period with 20,000 fans out front on the big screen TVs. And that moment right there, I mean, that when they won, when they got the empty netter, and then when, you're counting down 10, 9, 8, just remarkable. The depth and the layers to what that means. It's not just winning a Stanley Cup. It's seeing Raleighwood. It's seeing a community kind of, coming together. There's no politics. There's no left and right. There's no male versus female. There's no old versus young. There's no Tar Heel versus what is NC State?
Wolfpack. Yeah,
Wolfpack. Right. It's just like we're a community. We're its own little ecosystem, and that was really, really cool to witness that. And I sat back. There was a few moments where I just stood there and I took it in and said, hey, 15 years ago when Stan and Tim, opened up Primetime here in Raleigh, we were the only full-time hockey school. There were some coaches, obviously, that had been here for years that had done some programming, but, full-time operation. And here we are 15 years later, and hockey has grown significantly. The amount of girls that are now playing, and there's all sorts of hockey schools and hockey programs. And to think that maybe Primetime and the Raptors and Stan and I and all sorts of other people had a hand in some of that growth was really, really special to kind of witness that. So,
yeah. And I mean, the growth of hockey in the Carolinas is just, it's almost like it's just beginning now that we've got, because the last cup was 20 years ago. So that gave a huge bump. Well, and just one other quick note on, you mentioned like the 70-year-olds watching and stuff like that. So I was in my front yard yesterday. I was talking to my neighbor. I think Charlie's probably in his 70s, and he's from West Virginia. I was like, we did it. He's like, yeah, the Canes won. And he's asking me all these questions. He's like, so at some point the goalie wasn't in the net, like towards the end of the game. Like, isn't that a penalty? And I was like, I love this. Like, I don't know that he's watched hockey before. And he's like totally locked into it. Right. And it was so exciting. He's like, that's a hard game to watch. That game is crazy. It is so fast. And I mean, that was one of the most intense. I mean, I just can't imagine how freaking hard those guys had to work. Every shift is unbelievable. I think the average shift in the NHL is 30 seconds, right? Just everything you got. 30 seconds. Yeah. Now you got 90 seconds, at least for a forward. Now you got 90 seconds off. Now, as hard as you can go for 30 seconds. I guess. Yeah.
What was crazy too, I thought, being a hockey guy, that third period, I was standing outside. I was super hot, right? I don't know how everybody stood there for 3 periods. They kept putting the, if you're going to faint, text this number. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to have to text these guys 5 minutes after I get here. Everybody's going to look around. All the new guys about to faint. But for me, like as a hockey guy, I was dying in that third period because I was watching the game as a coach. So I'm like, I'm moving and I'm stressing out. I'm feeling the anxiety. And it's become a more knowledgeable crowd. You can tell the crowd reacts to certain things when a puck gets dumped out or, a shot gets blocked or Bussy makes a save. So it is interesting to see that more people are watching and starting to learn the game. For me, like the last 8 minutes of that game, it went by fast. And I think we were also locked into this, like, we're going to win the cup.
Yeah.
If you look back, Vegas had like 6 or 7 chances. Like,
it was a 2-0 game.
Go in. It's a 2-1 game.
I go off the crossbar.
Like backdoor, like any of those could have easily gone in. And then it's like, oh crap, it's 2-1, and Vegas puts a push, and who knows, we're going overtime, and now we got game 7. So I think that got lost in it too, where that last 8 minutes, like the Canes played one of the best games they played all playoffs. They played Canes hockey right up to that last 8 minutes. They got a little bit of luck. Bussy played really, really well. But you're right. Rod has them playing a tough style of hockey where you constantly have to skate. You constantly have to be physical. You have to be extremely conditioned to play that way. You have to be bought in, because if one guy gets on the wrong side or doesn't move his feet or just relaxes for a moment, the entire system breaks down. So it's a really high risk way of playing. But if everybody buys in, it's super, super successful. So, man, what a really, really cool style of playing, and to see it work, I think is really special. This notion that like they play boring hockey is crap. It's, people kept saying, well, they're not a high scoring team. It's like, well, the internet is available to you. And with ChatGPT, it's even easier now. Last year, the Canes were 9th in the NHL in scoring, right? Top 10. This year, they were 3rd. So this narrative that they can't score is just not factually accurate, right? Just because the Canes don't have a superstar who gets 110 points, people are lazy. They're just
I think they had 7 players that scored 20 goals or more.
And that's the key, right? It's like, look back on the Stanley Cup winning teams have depth. They have guys in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th line that contribute. It's not about, I love Edmonton, but it's not about McDavid and Draisaitl. It's never been about those guys. It's always been about, can your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th line contribute? And that's how they built this team. It's like, who cares that Aho and Svechnikov weren't scoring every game? They didn't need to. They didn't need it. And so, yeah, you'll love this. I got an email yesterday, I think, and it was, hey, do you guys do private lessons? I have 3 kids. And I emailed back and said, how old are your kids and what's their level? And the guy replied, they're 7, 11, and 14, and they've never played hockey before.
Yeah.
So that's a guy that literally just watched Canes hockey and decided,
like, we want to do this. Yeah.
All 3 of his kids are now going to play hockey. I'm like, wait, they don't even know how to skate. They don't have equipment. They've never played. And it was like, okay, well, we don't do learn to skate, or send them to Polar and have them learn how to skate first. But man, that was it. Yeah. 3 new kids and a whole family into the sport. Phenomenal.
I love it.
So if anybody ever says, it's just sports, or why are you sitting down on the couch for 2 hours to watch sports? Well, it's more than just sports. It's a window into life,
Well, we're going super long here, and I actually have another call, but we got to keep going for a minute because I have one last question, because I didn't realize this. I think my boys told me this. The biggest Canes hater of all, PK Subban, you and Stan trained him?
Yeah, so PK, he grew up in Toronto. I believe it was Rexdale, and he was very well known growing up. His dad was a local principal at a local public school, and he had 2 brothers. They all played hockey, and there's a few cool stories there. So PK was a really good hockey player himself growing up. He had played on a few different GTHL teams, and the kids that. I have a little bit of a resume kind of on our program guide, and I don't talk about it a lot because I think I had a lot of success, not just because I was a decent coach, but I was paired up with great athletes. And in Toronto, it's just proximity, right? It's some of the best athletes playing hockey. And so I got a pretty long list of kids that have made it to colleges and the NHL. And a lot of the kids always say to me, like, was he really good back then? Like, was he good when you coached him? And the answer is always like, yeah. Like, the kids that make it, like, when they're younger. And, PK was one of, 20, 30 guys in the GTHL in his age group where you knew he had a really good chance to make it. Again, I might be getting this wrong, but for me, PK, he was a huge personality. He loved the game. And so as a teammate, you know, when you have somebody that treats every practice like it's the Stanley Cup Finals, half of his team loved him because of the value that he brought as a player, and half of the team struggled with him because, you know, he doesn't give you a shift off. You know, in practice, he's gonna put you through the boards. He's gonna make that extra move and bury it on the goalie, and then probably celebrate after because he's, you know, he loves being a human. So he played on a team, the Markham Majors, and Stan's business in Toronto was really big. It was at a rink called Chesswood Arenas, and Stan did a whole bunch of sessions with a lot of different teams, and one of the teams was the Markham Majors. And so I believe it was every Saturday Markham Majors would go on the ice for an hour, and Stan would put them through some skill development sessions, and then the team would come up to our training facility and they would do skating, treadmill, and synthetic shooting range, and they would work out. And I always tell the story that PK on the shooting range never wanted to leave. So he was born in 89. I'm an 84. So I'm only 5 years older than PK. And at the time, you know, PK's, I think, 14, which would make me 19. So I'm not that much older than PK. And I'm doing sessions with the team and PK on the synthetic shooting range. And on a Saturday afternoon, you know, if they were my last session, I was looking to get out of there, right? I'm 19 years old. I'm looking to go home and get the rest of my Saturday going. PK would just want to stay. We did this game where you'd have the net together and you'd shoot until you could open the posts. And then the first person to get it through the opening would win. And I just remember him wanting to stay and do that game over and over and over. And I'm like, dude, I just want to go home. And so that work ethic and that commitment back then was really clear. He played on some spring teams. One was called the Mighty Ducks. And my brother, who played AAA growing up in Toronto, played on some spring teams with PK. So at the time, my mom had kind of met his dad. And I know a number of years ago when he was playing for the Habs, Stan took one of our clients, their family, who were huge fat Habs fans, down to the Lenovo Center and met PK afterwards. And he was great with them. And I think he signed one of the dad's arm. Like, it was so ridiculous that the guy was like so enamored with, oh my God, it's PK Subban. Can you sign my arm? And like a 45-year-old guy got a signature on his actual body. And so, yeah, PK, you know, we know PK well, and, you know, he's made a name for himself kind of in the TV world. He's obviously done a great job kind of as an ambassador for hockey and in the cancer space, right? Helping fundraise and kind of grant $10 million to a local children's hospital. So, yeah, we've known PK and a whole bunch of other NHLers for a long time, but yeah, PK's the man.
He's not real liked by Canes fans. He's shat on us the entire time, but
yeah, he did. You know, he was
keeps
a Canes hater. He was a Canes hater, and yeah, I don't want to bash PK, but you know, I was a big fan.
It's all in good fun.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's funny because I've been actually talking about this. Like, I was a huge fan of the panel that had Gretzky, Biz, Lundqvist, and Anson Carter. I thought they were exceptional. They had the perfect mix of talk hockey. You know, Biz made some jokes, but it never kind of got derailed. And then you had Gretzky, right? And Gretzky, he's really good on TV. And I really love that panel. And, you know, the PK, along with a lot of the other guys kind of in the TV world, nobody really gave the Canes a shot. And if you remember, Gretzky picked the Canes in 6. And I remember when the Canes had won against the Habs and they were doing that last kind of hour, if you listen to Gretzky carefully, he was one of the only ones that
he was the only one on that panel. Yeah.
I think somebody else, the host, who's great, and I can't remember his name. He's phenomenal. Yeah. He also he kind of copied Gretzky, but in terms of like the hockey guys,
I would wait to hear what Gretzky has to say and be like, yeah, whatever he says.
That's kind of what he did, right? Whereas like I think the other guys all picked Vegas, and then Gretzky picks Kane, so then he jumped on it. But if you listen to Gretzky very carefully, like he nailed it. And I remember at the time I'm like, man, I mean, I think the Canes can win. I'm picking Canes, but did you listen to what Gretzky said? And so, yeah, PK, he's gotten some hate thrown at him, and I think it's deserved. And he's probably learned a little bit of a lesson. But you know, he's in the business of being entertaining,
Absolutely.
and he's nailed it in terms of that. So
That's cool. Well, Matt, I got to go. I'm actually missing another meeting right now, but because this conversation's been so great. Let's talk again, man. Let's keep it going. We'll find another time if you're up for coming back on. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, let's do it. I would love.
All
Yeah,
right.
maybe next time. Maybe next time we can talk charity, because I think there's a
Yeah,
whole
I know we didn't
charity
really.
aspect
Yeah,
that I think
yeah,
would be a great angle for some of your viewers as well.
absolutely. And on that note,
Sweet.
if people want to find you and find RTCF, check your acorns and all that, you want to just give like a quick outro?
Yeah, so for hockey people, we run Primetime Hockey, so primetimehockey.com. And then if anybody is listening and they're kind of in the men's cancer space, or you know somebody that's had testicular cancer, we're not just testicular cancer, we're kind of trying to tear down stigmas around men's health. And so you can find us at checkyouracorns.org.
It's awesome. Thanks, Coach. We'll see you next week at the rink.
Yeah, you're the best. Good stuff.
All right, man.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye.